Hey, what's up, YouTubers? It's me, Johnny. And tonight I want to talk to you about the coming great default. And what do I mean by that? Well, in 2008, 2009, during the last recession, we saw tremendous increase in the federal deficit to bail out the banks and to fund the war on terror. And that led to a great recession and slow growth economy. And we're still really coming out of that despite all the government inflation and deficit spending. We still don't have a growing economy. In fact, right now in 2016, this is February, we see the world economy slowing down. We see the United States economy slowing down. And we've seen a real lack of growth in jobs and a lack of prosperity in the United States. And while everything's slowing down, not too many people are talking about it, but because of all this government intervention in the economy, quite a few people really think it worked and things are going to get better. And what we've seen recently is maybe a change in perception or a change in attitude. We're seeing more and more just average everyday people realizing that we spend all this money and we don't have much to show for it. In fact, generally speaking, it's only libertarian types or anarchist types who talk about these things and how the failure of government has really destroyed and hollowed out the economy, and how it all is going to lead to tears probably for most people. Anyways, this is what I want to talk about tonight. There's basically three big spending categories in the U.S. budget: Social Security, Medicare, military spending, and interest on the debt. And then everything else is discretionary, and that budget more and more is really small. Used to be when I was a kid in the 1980s, the discretionary part of the budget was quite a bit bigger, and it was worth fighting over because there's so much money involved. Now more and more we're seeing the discretionary budgets getting to be smaller and smaller. There's not much worth fighting over, and it takes every penny in revenue and every penny in debt offerings and every penny of the Federal Reserve inflationary policy, or they're increasing the credit supply to buy up all this debt in order to fund the deficit. And we've seen in recent years, in fact, it fund the whole U.S., well, part of the U.S. budget. In fact, shortfall in taxes to meet the expenditure of the government is really getting bigger and bigger. And I think since we're going into another recession, this is 2016, I think either this year or this time next year, we'll be in an official recession, and we'll see the budget deficits just go really through the roof. And that's going to cause a lot of pain and consternation. And it could be in the future. I'm thinking 10 or 15 years from now, we'll probably see either freezing of Social Security or cutbacks. What do I mean by that? I think what's most likely to happen, they're going to raise the age of retirement, which is effectively a default on Social Security spending. Now, we may not see an actual cut, but I would be surprised if we didn't. But what we very well could see is a definite raising the retirement age to like 75. In fact, they could raise it to 1 or 2 years older than what the average person is expected to live, man or woman. And that would really put a crimp in most people's retirement dreams and plans for retirement. In fact, I think more and more the generation ahead of me, the baby boomers, are starting to figure out that their dreams of retiring in comfort and ease and having plenty of money to meet their retirement needs is more or less coming to an end. And with the next recession, I believe we'll see the stock market crash and burn much, much worse than 2008, 2009, and it won't recover. I don't think it'll cover. In fact, if you look at Japan from 1989 until like right now today, the stock market still hasn't got above its old highs. And the prosperity in Japan hasn't really been all that tremendous with all the budget deficit spending there. I'm not sure what the ultimate outcome there is going to be, but we can see how there's how can I put this? We can see how there's a plan, well, not a plan, but we can see how with the trajectory of the Japanese stock market, how it's possible that the stock market may never be reinflated to what it was. And that's a real possibility in the next recession. Anyways, what I mean by the Great Default is 10 or 15 years, we're going to start seeing real cutbacks in the government budget. We'll see a default in the bond market. The government won't be able to raise money unless the Federal Reserve buys all the debt out there, which is a possibility, but that'll be very, very inflationary. And once inflation gets above 15 or 20%, I don't think the government will keep funding the budget deficit myself. So we'll see tremendous pressures on the government to cut back. And the three biggest categories that they can cut back on would be Medicare, Social Security, and military spending. And probably they'll start first with the military budget and our wars on terror. And then they'll probably raise the retirement age to Social Security for when you can try to maybe over 75. And then last but not least will be Medicare. That will be easier to cheat on. They'll just make us all wait in line until we die. And that's how they'll get out of paying our health care costs. Anyways, most people don't see it coming and they just don't want to buy it or believe it. So these are just my thoughts on what I think the future is in about 10 or 15 years. Over the last 20, 30 years in the Western world, we've seen a real slowdown in the rate of growth of the economies. So I don't think it's possible to grow our way out of this. And as of now, with how big the national budgets of most Western countries are, I don't see how they can really cut back slowly and come out of this. They'll just have to make really drastic cuts. And I think we've already have a plan, or we've seen examples of this in the past, and that would be Canada in the mid-90s. They cut back a third of their budget. So people who think this can't happen, just look at Canada in the early to mid-90s. They cut back on a third, and it was pretty horrendous, but they got through it, and they were better for it. And then in the 70s and early 80s, we saw New Zealand. Now, I don't know the specifics of how much they had to cut back, but they cut back a tremendous amount. In fact, if you go through the old movie reels, you can see some pretty scary movies on the period and what the actual fear people were going through of the breakdown of society with their mild inflation. It never really got to hyperinflation, but it was pretty scary if you look at the footage from those old movies. Anyways, those two examples alone are excellent examples of how much the governments really can cut back. And then in the early to mid 90s, we saw something similar, not quite as bad as New Zealand or Canada in the mid 90s, but Sweden, their whole banking system came down and they really had to do some belt tightening. So for people who think the government can or won't cut back, or they'll inflate the money supply and create a whole hyperinflationary way to pay this off, I just don't think that's going to happen. I think the powers that be and the policymakers realize they're not going to hyperinflate away the wealth of the elites. So we'll get maybe mild inflation and up to 20%. We'll get a stabilization of the money supply. And then whatever a stock market at, we'll see a crash and burn of that. And we'll see probably gold hold up pretty well and real estate moderately well. So to get through all this, you might want to have a portion of your wealth in gold and maybe a portion in real estate for income. And that's what I think is going to happen. Tell me what you think. Leave a comment, like the video. Tell me what you think. All right, thanks.